Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I bring you founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, artists all around the world of crypto and blockchain. And today I have an amazing guest. I'm really looking forward to this interview. This man is the CEO of a very popular exchange around the world. He is the CEO of Bittrex Global. His name is Oliver Linch. Oliver, welcome.
Hi there, real pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. It's an honor. So let's kick things off, and I'll ask you, first, what's your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
Sure. Well, as much as anything in the crypto world is logical, I like to think so. I'm a lawyer by background, but I like to say I'm a lawyer in recovery. So I spent over a decade in financial regulatory law, covering the whole gamut really. So traditional financial regulatory, financial services, banks, broker dealers, financial market infrastructure, and exchanges and brokers. And then the second part of what I did was advising on fintech, and you take traditional financial market infrastructure and fintech and mash them together, and you sort of get crypto. And so for the past few years, I've been general counsel and CEO of Bittrex Global. We announced at the end of last year that we were ceasing operations, and so I'm spending my time now undergoing an orderly wind down of a crypto exchange, which is it's disappointingly novel, right? We're so used in the press and public consciousness for crypto exchanges to be the focus of scandal or people losing money. And so I'm really proud that we're showing that there's a better way of doing it. There's a better way of doing everything, including shutting up shop. So we're in the process of giving everyone back all of their funds, and really showing that an orderly wind down is something that can be achieved. So that's what I'm spending my time doing. I've also just become the new head of the Financial Futures Markets Unit at the Adam Smith Institute. I'm sure you and all your listeners will know the Adam Smith Institute as one of the premier think tanks in the UK. And they're really focusing now. Historically, they've been focused on more sort of socioeconomic issues. They're really focusing now on Web3, fintech, and the opportunities that can afford to really help grow the UK's standing as a hub for this kind of thing, which is what the UK government says it wants to do.
Interesting. I was part of I was a Celsius customer, so I understand what the wind down bankruptcy process is all about more than I ever want to know again.
Yep, absolutely.
But there is growth, there is development in the markets, and recently the FCA and the London Stock Exchange made a couple announcements, right, regarding exchange traded notes. What are those announcements all about? How's that going to help build UK's financial system? What is that?
Yeah, it's big news. So the UK, for some years now, has said that all financial instruments, which is the UK equivalent of securities, the EU equivalent of securities as well, right? We call them financial instruments, but we mean derivatives and exchange traded products and things that aren't just spot. The UK said all of those in relation to crypto were banned for everyone, right? Completely unacceptable, no matter how sophisticated, high net worth, large corporates, all the people that normally get exceptions from those kind of things, there were no exceptions. And the market said, this puts the UK as a real outlier because the EU, our nearest neighbor, does allow them. Right? You can get a license in the EU under MiFID, and you can allow them for certain categories of users. And the UK said, no, we're not doing that. And this was, in a world where everyone's looking increasingly to the institutions to really drive progress in the crypto sector, this was holding the UK back quite a lot. And I think to the surprise of many, the FCA last week said, oh, okay, actually, we disagree. we're going to come, we're going to change our mind. We're going to allow sophisticated investors, high net worths, and large corporates to trade these instruments. And so that's where you get CETNs, the crypto ETNs, exchange traded notes. And for the first time, there's for a while there's been this disconnect between what the government say they want, which is the UK to become a hub for crypto and for digital assets in general, and what the FCA, the regulators, say they want, which is very cautious, conservative clampdown, frankly. For the first time, we're actually seeing those interests align and moving towards the policy-driven government side of things, and say actually that there is a safe way to do this. Yes, we need to put protections in place. I think those people that said, oh, well, now they'll open it up to retail, they're wide off the mark. I mean, maybe one day, but that's somewhere in the future. Those protections are still very much in place, but this is the FCA, I think, getting on board with the idea that if the UK is really going to cement its place in the financial sectors more generally, not just in fintech and digital assets, but more generally, it can't be this outlier that just says no, no, no.
You said they changed their mind, right? This is a stark and abrupt shift, right? What caused that shift, and why is it now going to be a positive thing for the UK?
I think a number of factors would have gone into the decision to change their mind. I think the fact that the story of the crypto winter the last few years in general has been the strength of the maintained strength or even strengthening of institutional interest in crypto, right? The fact is, every major bank now has a substantive crypto desk, even at ones that say they don't. Every fund manager knows that they have to be offering some kind of crypto exposure to their clients, otherwise they're going to be seen as stuck in the mud. Every market maker, every broker dealer is now really engaging with crypto. And what they want to do is bring 20, 30 years worth of trading experience and modeling and risk analysis and risk management, all that experience that they've got in TradFi, they want to bring that over to the crypto sector. And the fact is, despite all the scandals, you mentioned Celsius earlier, and that's really the least of the scandals from back in 2022, right? Despite all of those scandals, the one thing that is very clear is that digital assets are not going anywhere. They're here to stay. If you don't, I think there's an increasing awareness that if you don't create a path for good actors to behave well, all you really do is clear out a path for bad actors to behave nefariously. And so the UK, in taking the step, is not really loosening the network at all, not loosening its protections at all. What it is creating a pathway for compliance. And that's what so many in the industry, both in the TradFi and in the digital asset sector, want to see. And so that's why they'll be cheered by this announcement, because it's saying it's not a stick your fingers in the air and say no approach anymore. It's okay, this thing is real. Digital assets are real. Distributed ledger technology is important. How do we make it work for people?
I want to get into that comment you said. I'm going to do that after this next question about the good actors versus the bad actors. Let's talk about the good actors first. For years, everybody's like, the institutions are coming. The institutions are coming. They're going to be coming. In the U.S., obviously, BlackRock and Fidelity and all the others, this past January were approved for a spot Bitcoin ETF, right? The institutions are here, right? But is it all that everybody expected it to be that the institutions arrived? How has their appearance affected the overall market and then the market in the UK as well?
So I think the question is a good one, because it demonstrates the lack of patience that we as an industry have, right? It's really easy to forget that we have achieved, I say we, meaning the entire sort of crypto community sector, whatever you want to call us, we have achieved in a couple of years what it took traditional finance decades to achieve. And the fact that there isn't a single magic panacea. You wave your wand and then everyone's a billionaire, right? Actually, is an indication of just how powerful people know that crypto can be, and their impatience, their keenness to really see it succeed. So yeah, the institutions are coming. The institutions in many ways are here, right? But as you say, the big shift for them, ETFs, that's 3 months old, less than 3 months old, right? That like I've lost count of the number of articles over the years that have said, oh, Bitcoin's dead, or this thing that happened didn't magically solve all of the problems and lead to a world of sunshines and rainbows. I'm like, no, this stuff is hard, right? It's difficult. Conceptually, it's difficult. People are still getting their head around it. The US, which I know we're going to talk about in a bit, still hasn't figured out at a basic level what most crypto is, right? So are you going to solve the world's problems in 3 months? No, you're just not. And I appreciate the enthusiasm. I appreciate the keenness, but I'm a realist here. And basically, in the world of finance, nothing gets achieved in 3 months.
I agree. So let's talk about that comment about the good actors, or people are assuming are institutions, and we'll get into that, versus bad actors. Been bad actors for the past week, right? Bad actors are nothing new, but there's been some bad actors, regarding meme coins. I don't know if you've been following the meme coin frenzy, but the market's tanked over the past day because we need speculative excess wiped out. But you said it cleared the path for bad actors, and there is crowdfunding going on, which is more like stealing right now. So how do we clean that out so that the bad actors go away, or will they ever go away, and the good actors can be more confident about entering?
So I think there are a few points to make here. The first is a little bit trite, but I'm going to make it anyway, which is that the number of bad actors in the digital assets world is relative to the number of bad actors in traditional finance, very small, right? But everyone loves a story about meme coins or about some stupid dog or about whatever it is. And no one really writes the same stories when major financial institution is fined, or banks are fined, or there's an investigation into traditional finance. That just doesn't make headlines in the same way. So I'm not the person that says, oh, don't point the finger at me when you've got problems of your own. I'm like, well, two people can be wrong, okay, but let's also get some perspective here and some context here. The second point I'd make is look at the progress that's been made in the digital asset sector in the past 3 years, right? Which I say is a very short period of time. The amount of work that has been done on a voluntary basis by the community, by the sector itself, as it grows up, as it goes through this shift in focus from stupid rockets to the moons type stuff to actually just being yet another part of the wider financial institution, wider financial market, has been enormous. And I don't want anyone to slap us on the back and say good job, but I do want people to acknowledge that has happened and is continuing to happen. And the third point I'd say is a lot of that has been driven by initiatives within the financial digital asset sector, but is now being accelerated by actual engagement from governments and from regulators who for far too long have just sat there and said, well, look, if we ignore this stuff, maybe it will go away and we don't need to worry about it. Actually, this comes back to my point earlier, which is the US is a classic example of the number of institutions, Bittrex being one of them, that said, look, we want to do the right thing, but we literally do not know how, and you won't tell us how. And so Bittrex in the US, which is not Bittrex Global, but Bittrex in the US, ended up saying, all right, well, look, we just can't operate in the US anymore because you simply won't create a framework within which we can operate. So is that the institution's fault? Is that the financial provider's fault? Is that the exchange's fault? Or is that governments, regulators, policymakers failing to do their basic job of providing a framework whereby people can actually provide services? And the result is clear to see. It's really clear to see. And the losers are, in that case, US citizens who not only now don't have access to the services that people around the world are having and are enjoying and are getting the benefits of, because too many institutions are just saying, right, I don't want to touch the US. Not only are they suffering in that way, but they're also suffering because the only people, or an increasingly large number of people, who are operating in the US are doing so without all of those protections and guardrails that decades of experience in the traditional finance sector have built up. So you're just creating a bad situation and over time making it worse.
I was just thinking the same way yesterday. I was like, yeah, I agree with you 100%. You said earlier, you said a little bit about derivatives. And I don't know if you know about my background, but I was at AIG for 11 years. So I know the dangers of institutions becoming bad actors when you can't even see what's happening in your institution as a possibility. So, and then when I read about, these ETNs in UK being only available to professional investors, since these professional investors or quote professional investors are not, have not been in crypto and are not native, how do you define what a professional investor is in crypto? Because it may not be who you think it should be.
Well, so thankfully the UK has a pretty good framework for this, and they over many years, including going back to when they were part of the EU, which is where this terminology comes from, have built up a pretty good explanation of what that means. Where it gets difficult is in more the sort of on the peripheries, right? So for some purposes, the UK has a system of self-certification. In some cases, it doesn't. In crypto, it's going more down the doesn't apply route. So there will be some people who will sort of assume that they fall into a category, but won't, or assume won't fall into a category, but do. So there's going to be an awful lot of people out there that are just going to need to go and take legal advice on this. It's not really difficult, but you do need to work through the logic and work through it very carefully because you don't want to find yourself on the wrong side of the line, that's for sure.
I know in the US, FINRA put together a comprehensive qualification exam. I was one of the first 200 people to pass it. I didn't pursue a financial career, but is there some kind of qualification, like a FINRA equivalent in the UK where people can take exam and say, hey, I'm a professional qualified investor or advisor?
So the system works quite differently in the UK. It's much more about status. And one of the major categories that people are going to be relying on is the requirement to be a large corporate, and those take into account things like number of employees and revenue and that kind of thing. So it's much less focused on passing exams and much more focused on your status and your experience.
Got it. Okay. So, in addition to the ETNs, in addition to the FCA stock exchange regarding these notes, what other regulatory concerns and solutions are coming down the pike in both the UK and the US?
So in the UK, there's two big things going on. There's the stablecoin regulation, which is progressing really well, and I think it has some problems, and there are some things that need some work on, but it's getting there. And then there's the wider regulatory framework for utility tokens that seems to have taken a bit of a back seat at the moment. But I think it is an important component, and I know a lot of people are asking for that to be accelerated as well. The US, on the other hand, man, it's a story of people pulling in all sorts of different directions, right? So we got the Bitcoin spot ETF. That was big news. Next in the pipeline is apparently the ETH spot ETF. That could be in the next couple of months. I think it was going to drag out a little bit longer than that because I think the politics behind it, which essentially goes to the classification of ETH, is going to upset a lot of people in a lot of different ways. So I wouldn't be surprised if that drags on for some months and maybe even into 2025. You've then got the perennial question, like the one that nobody has solved or even really tried to solve, which is the fundamental characterization or categorization of crypto, other than BTC and maybe ETH, right? And so you've got a bunch of cases. Most high profile is the XRP case, but you've still got this problem that the US has had from the very beginning, which is that it tries to view crypto through the prism of traditional finance. And so you get this unedifying discussion as to what is crypto? Is it a bit like a security, a bit like a commodity? Is it derivative? The answer, the best answer is actually no, it's none of those things. It's crypto. And it's its own class of asset. And the only way to make sense of that, the only way to regulate it, the only way to allow people to engage with it safely is to regulate it on that basis and actually engage with it on its own terms and say, look, this is not analogous to or not closely analogous enough to traditional financial categorization. So you're just going to have to deal with it because it's important and it's not going anywhere.
I see other countries in the world, like Hong Kong, like Singapore, like changing their 100-year-old laws to adapt, right?
Yep.
So, what lessons are they learning from the U.S. and the U.K. where they're making the adaptation? Are they seeing that we're failing? Like, what are they seeing that is making them, make those moves quickly?
Well, I think there's a bunch of reasons why they're doing it, and to that list, I would add places like Dubai with Vara, I'd add Japan, I'd add Korea, and all of these places are they're competing. They're trying to become a hub for digital assets. They're trying to cement their status. Even the UK, even the EU with Mika is trying to compete, right? No one ever accused the EU of being nimble, right? But even the EU has managed to do it. And the reason is they recognize that there's an entire sector here that is going to become increasingly important, possibly to the extent that people just haven't quite realized, and they want to be in the door. The US has not done that, and it is pretty clearly signaled it has no interest in competing. It has no interest in trying to grab a piece of the sector. In fact, if you look at the remarks of people like Chair Gensler, they want nothing to do with it. They don't want a piece of this sector. So that's why there's a complete difference in approach. There's people that are looking to an opportunity, looking to see how they can allow people to do it safely and in a meaningful way around the world. And then there are those jurisdictions, the US chief among them, that just say, we're out. We don't want anything to do with this. And I think it's very disappointing. And it's disappointing as a whole because I think the idea that you could really achieve what you want to achieve in financial sector without the US, if you really think that the future of crypto, and I do, 5-10 years from now, whatever it is that crypto is just going to be another component of the wider financial services industry. So you'll get the securities guys and the derivatives guys and the commodities guys and the crypto guys, and it's all just like part of the same thing. To think you can do that without the US is quite naive. The US still has the best infrastructure, has the universities, has the entrepreneurs, it has the technology, it has all of these components. So it's tempting sitting here outside the US to think, right, well, we'll just pull down the shutters on the US and pretend it doesn't exist. Unfortunately, that doesn't work. And so I think it is incumbent upon the US, whether that's Congress or the regulators or whatever it may be. And I'm no US lawyer, but whatever it may be, they need to figure it out because without it, two things. One, the sector as a whole, including US banks and US persons, are are not going to get what they want. And two, going back to this issue of bad actors, again, this is the mantra. If you don't create a path for good actors to behave well, all you really do is create a path for bad actors to behave nefariously.
Yeah, we've seen plenty of that. So what do you think is going to be, or maybe there won't be, but what do you think is going to be the tipping point to have the U.S. come on board finally, if there's a tipping point?
Well, look, that's the big question. I know we're starting to run out of time here, so I'll give you some suggestions as to what it might be, and I think first amongst them is politics. I think lots of lawyers sit around and scratch their beards and look very serious about these things, as if we were all engaged in a genuine attempt to come up with some kind of legal analysis. And the lawyers certainly are engaging in a genuine attempt. So the problem is the lawyers don't run the country, the politicians do. The lawyers don't make the laws, although by shunting it off to the courts, unfortunately that's what's happening to happen, right? We are having to create laws by case, which is just a really bad way of engaging with the challenge that crypto is setting us. The reality is, until the politics are sorted out, and maybe once we're out of the election cycle this year, that can happen, maybe. But until there's some direction, some policy direction, someone said, look, this is what we should be doing, now let's go out and achieve it. I just don't think there's going to be that, as you say, inflection point.
It was going to be an interesting year because I think there's 26 or 27 countries having their election. So I think it's going to be a really interesting year. So I want to thank you very much for your time today. I enjoyed speaking with you. I'm looking forward to seeing more growth and development in the UK. And I have one last question. How can people find out more information about you, about the work you do, about this FCA and London Exchange announcements, or even I was going to say be a customer of Bittrex, but you're winding down. So, but how can they find out more information?
Yeah, you can't become a customer of Bittrex anymore. But thank you, of course, to everyone that has in the past, and it's been a pleasure serving you in that capacity. If for some reason you want to hear what I have to say about things, you can find me on X or Twitter or whatever we're supposed to call it these days. I'm at Oliver Linch, and you can find me on LinkedIn as well, Oliver_Linch.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a real pleasure.